Hello there, and hi. Welcome back to Harry Potter Abridged. We are, as you may well know, but in case you're just joining us, we are now beginning the seventh chapter of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which is book number 3 in the series. And chapter 7 of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is entitled The Boggart in the Wardrobe. This is in my opinion, a pretty cool chapter. A very interesting chapter because at one of the main things that that the chapter sort of brings to mind for the reader, especially the first time around, or really any time that you're going through this series, the one question that you kind of are faced with is, what would your own personal Boggart be? What would this embodiment of your greatest fear look like? What form would it take? It's a very personal question. It's akin to like what would you see in the mirror of Erised, or I was talking with Adva the other day about this, and the one that she mentioned that I thought was in the same vein as these questions is, what would be the happy thought that you would think to cast your Patronus? And I think that's also really interesting. And maybe it's personal, but it's like, because it's a happy thought, it's like the kind of thing that most people would be comfortable with sharing, so you'd be more likely to get a good answer, or to get an answer at all. But anyway, things that one might think about. So, right, the chapter itself, here it is in front of me. So, as you may remember, the end of the previous chapter, we ended with Hagrid's miserable situation, even though nothing's actually happened to him yet. Well, he knows that the school governors have been contacted, and he's concerned about, being fired. But then at the very end of his meeting with, I say meeting with, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione obviously visited him in his cabin, and then all of a sudden he realized it was late and that Harry shouldn't be out of the castle, and he took them back. So, anyway, and so picking up from there, we find out that Malfoy doesn't appear in class until, it says, late on Thursday morning. I guess, if I'm not mistaken, that was their first lesson, so that would be like because that would have been Monday, so this is a few days later. And he shows up in the middle of double potions because he's Malfoy, really, and he knows he can get away with it, so it like looks even more. It's like he gets to, and it's funny because this is a thing that I never really thought about it like that. There's a lot of things that Snape likes to accuse Harry of being things that remind him of his father, which Harry's not really like his father that much. I think they have like similar senses of humor in some ways, but it's like, at the same age, quite different people. Anyway, but Malfoy did essentially, and does, I think, in a lot of ways, like a lot of the things that Snape sort of like hates Harry for, even though they're not really actual traits of Harry. But there's the time when in book 6, when Harry is left on the train by Malfoy under his invisibility cloak because Harry was snooping and Malfoy caught him. Anyway, Harry arrives late to the school, and Snape's all accusing him of like wanting to make an entrance. I'm sure that's what, even though like it doesn't really make sense because he anyway. But that's exactly what Malfoy does here. He shows up halfway in the middle of the class to make like the most dramatic effect of this injury. You can hear my air quotes, right? That he still has, even though, of course, we know that it was just a cut, and no matter how deep it is with magic and somebody like Madame Pomfrey around, you don't have to worry about that. Like, that he was good pretty much from the minute that she released him. In fact, I'm a little surprised almost that like there wasn't a way for somebody to find out that like that he was faking. But whatever. He arrives and he's got his arm all bandaged up and is bound in a sling and shit. Like there's no way on earth he would need that. Anyway, and so he's acting like very like heroic and like like he's made it through this really difficult trial. And Pansy Parkinson like enhances that by asking him if it hurts, and he's like, yeah. But then he also like looks at Crabbe and Goyle and winks at them, so obviously he's not in pain, but he's gonna play it up. And of course Snape reacts like by practically not reacting at all, just to be like, settle down, with just like the most subtle of rebukes for them talking. And of course Harry and Ron are like looking at each other like, you gotta be fucking kidding me, because there's no way we could just amble in halfway through potions class and get away with that shit. So it would be like detention at the least. So, dun, 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 dun. But of course, as we're reminded here, Malfoy always gets away with pretty much everything, and that's true. Like Snape just, he's just completely partial. And of course we're supposed to believe that to some extent he is playing a role in like actively like disliking Harry publicly and all of that. But it's like clear. First of all, it's clear in the way he acts. Like he's just not a happy person at all. And so he takes his pleasure in like making the people he dislikes miserable, or the people he sees as beneath him, even, like, which is all I can figure with the Neville thing. But anyway, so yeah, he just going off on my Snape tangents, because that happens. Anyway, so then, after all of the non-punishment for Malfoy just walking in the middle of class, we find out that they're working on the shrinking solution today. And of course, Malfoy, because he's feigning being, okay, so this is the thing about it, I guess, that I'm like, doesn't like everybody know that wounds are able to be healed magically? Is it because it was a magical creature? Can they like assume that maybe it had like some kind of venom or poison in its talons, even though there's no reason for them to think that about hippogriffs, because it's never mentioned. But like, how could anybody be fooled, I guess, is sort of my point about this. Like, even Snape, who I know is really lenient, like, why would he let that go? I don't know. I guess that's just, I don't know. I think maybe it's just to spite Harry that much more. I don't really know. Or maybe it's because of Malfoy's father's position at this point in history, with both of them assuming that Voldemort is no longer in the picture at all. So, maybe Snape sort of sees Malfoy as like, I don't know. I can't decide if he actually like still likes Lucius Malfoy or not, because you don't really get to see them interact much. I don't know. I don't really know. Maybe it's just because of the Slytherin thing specifically. I mean, he obviously favors them in all ways, but whatever. So anyway, Malfoy, again, with his thing, his whole setup, he voices aloud that he's going to need some of his ingredients cut up for this potion that they're making. And so, of course, Snape, definitely not asks, tells Ron to cut up the roots for Malfoy, and Ron, of course, is pissed off, and he's like, there's nothing wrong with your fucking arm. So anyway, Draco plays this whole thing for a little while. Then like he needs a shrivel fig skinned, and he gets Harry to do that, or he gets Snape to get Harry to do it. It's almost like Dudley bullying Harry through Uncle Vernon or something. I don't know. It's yeah. So this and then Ron like does a shitty job cutting up Malfoy's roots, and so when Malfoy complains loudly about that, Snape makes Ron switch his roots with Malfoy, and so then Ron's having to like, which I thought was interesting too, because like there's a note made about like how Ron did like a really like precise, perfect job, like he's really actually trying in this. So that's kind of cool. Like it's because there's so many times, especially because of the way the movies treat it, like where Ron looks kind of just more stupid than he actually is. He's just really more like absent-minded and just kind of silly. But when he puts his mind to something, he's actually seemingly fairly talented. So anyway, it's nice to get a hint that he was trying here. Hashtag Team Ron. And so anyway, so then Ron's having to like take the roots he cut up badly for Malfoy and try to repair the damage now. And so right, and the shrivel fig, and so then Malfoy like starts in about Hagrid, and he's all like, I don't think he's going to be a teacher for much longer. Father's not very happy about my injury. And Ron, continuing with his whole like I'm not putting up with Malfoy shit, is like, keep talking and I'll give you an injury and all that good shit. So Malfoy drones on about his father and the ministry and influence and fake sighing and all of that stuff. So they're like, so basically you want to get Hagrid fired. Okay, great. Like obviously, and I mean, they're saying that like they're just now realizing that like, come on, man. Well, I guess now that I think about it, this is the first time they've actually seen Malfoy. Okay, yeah, so I'm taking for granted that they know how he's acting, but they haven't seen him since he left for the hospital wing until this moment. So they're only witnessing his act now. So okay, fair enough. So yeah, so they're like, you're trying to get Hagrid fired. Because like I said before, the original incident I truly believe was just Malfoy being an idiot because he wasn't paying attention when Hagrid was explaining about how hippogriffs are easily offended. So it's only since he got injured that he's decided to take advantage of the injury to use that as a way to try and get Hagrid fired because he doesn't like Hagrid in the first place. And thinks him like sort of beneath everyone else, which is sort of ironic in terms of Hagrid's technically above everyone else. Anyway, and so Malfoy's like, well, yeah, that's one thing, but also I need you to cut up this other thing for my thing, and so. Yeah. Meanwhile, since we are in potions, and so that was the other thing I meant to like mention at the beginning of this chapter. Like, it's interesting how we like sort of are getting like a glimpse of like the happenings of what's going on through like their first classes of the term, because it's like we had Trelawney, we had briefly had McGonagall, and then wait a minute, what was the and then right, of course, Care of Magical Creatures at the end of the last chapter. So it was really the two main ones. Obviously the name of the chapter was Talons and Tea Leaves, and so that's in reverse, the Care of Magical Creatures, and then Trelawney's class. But we had McGonagall's in there long enough to sort of establish that there were animagus in the world, and what they are animagi, whatever. And also that divination is kind of bullshitty in most cases. Anyway, And so in this chapter, we have potions, and then we're gonna have defense against the dark arts. So anyway, since we're in potions, we get a mention of Neville, and Neville's having problems. And it's, it is one of those weird things, if you think about it, like, just from just logical standpoint, like, potion making, I mean, it's just a recipe. And granted, I know that there are people who suck at cooking, and most of those people have, like, and I can say that because I've done this, even though I'm actually fairly decent at cooking, like, it seems to be people who have, like, attention span problems. Like, that's why the people burn stuff, because they can't sort of, like, hang around while something is cooking, so they get distracted, and then, like, but I feel like in a classroom with a situation like this, first of all, you're not preparing food, but you've got a list of ingredients and a list of instructions. How I don't know. Maybe the number of instructions and ingredients is higher than we're being led to believe, and therefore, like, just the sheer chance of fucking up is higher because there's so much to do. I don't know, but it just seems like, I mean, I understand that Neville's intimidated by Snape. I get that. I totally get that. I mean, we all have people that we're intimidated by, and Snape's a dick. And for somebody, especially when you're starting out at 11 years old, like, it's easy to be intimidated by somebody like that, especially when they treat you like shit. But even so, it seems like he could just, like, post up in the back of the classroom and be like, fuck this, I'm not going to pay attention to any of this extra bullshit. I'm just going to focus on my work and do what I need to do. But it doesn't, I don't know. I might be just, like, forgetting a little bit what it's like to have anxiety take over you when you're a kid. I'm fairly certain that I actually did experience such a thing. I'm just, forgetting about it in the context of a classroom. But anyway, so Neville's, like, fucking up his potion is my point. And he's and it happens regularly, which is what's mentioned. And, we find out that the potion is supposed to be acid green, but as Snape comes by, it is orange. And then Snape proceeds to, like, explain in a condescending, shitty kind of manner, like, which steps Neville fucked up on. And so, and I mean, he's like, didn't I say this and didn't I say that? What am I going to have to do to get it through your thick skull? Just very, like, extra condescending. And so Hermione's like, I can help. Which of course she can. And of course Snape is a dick to her too. He's all like, I don't remember asking you to show off, Miss Granger. And so Snape threatens Neville with, basically he's going to feed his shrinking solution to his toad, which is pretty fucked up because, like, I assume that Snape would know how to mix an antidote for an unknown poison. I guess. I don't think a Bezoar would work for a toad. So, like, was he really going to be okay with just killing Neville's toad, or would he have, like, a way to reverse it, I guess, maybe? I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, he threatens Neville with that. He's like, we're going to, at the end of the class, we're going to feed Neville's toad with a few drops of this, and if he does it right, then everything will be cool. But if not, you're fucked. So Neville's, like, pleading with Hermione, like, and of course she does help him, because Hermione's good like that, and Neville is a nice boy. Oh, and so I'm sorry, just something else I completely thought about that's not, well, it's about Neville. somebody on Facebook, a friend of mine who has children, was posting about how her son was reading Lord of the Flies, which I do believe that I actually managed to read, even though reading books in school was really hard for me. But and I didn't really remember the plot anymore because it had been like so long. And so I went and like reviewed the plot or whatever. Anyway, what she was mentioning was that this character Piggy, who is sort of like the in a way the Neville of the story, like how her son was like hoping that Piggy was going to be the one that sort of saved the day, and she was like, and obviously that's not what happens. Spoiler alert: things go really badly for Piggy. Because Lord of the Flies is a book about children. It's not just. I mean, it's like an allegory or a metaphor or whatever you want to fucking say for like society versus like or civilization versus anarchy or however you want to, something like that. Anyway, the point was that she was like, "Oh man, I feel bad," and so the comments section of this post got into like people saying, "Well, you know, like this isn't Harry Potter," you know, and like because she said something about how well. Two different people sort of referenced it in different comment threads, in like that didn't see each other comment. But somebody else was like, yeah, or she I think was actually saying like, yeah, I feel like characters like Neville and I think she's mentioned the girl from the Hunger Games, which I haven't actually read. But anyway, that and other people were like, well, that's the harsh lesson you've got to learn and stuff like that. And I'm like, like they're just different fucking scenarios, at least comparing to like Neville, because like Neville left alone with, and say, like a bunch of other kids, especially if some of them were like Slytherins, and there's like no adults around and they're stranded on an island. Who the fuck knows what would happen to Neville? Probably not anything good. But the Neville who like grows up to kill an important snake and do other like really heroic deeds and things like that, does so because of like all sorts of different encouragements and help and circumstantial situations and just all of these things, and a lot of adults and friends that under adult supervision, who are not stranded on, even though this is kind of like, yeah, there's a bunch of kids running amok kind of, but not running amok really, because like at the end of the day they have rules and punishments and houses, and while everything may not be perfectly consistent, there is a system there. And so the Neville Neville, not the, there's not like multiple, the actual Neville in the fucking book comes to be who he is later because of all kinds of things. And in fact, the seeds, this ties in nicely because I wasn't even planning it, but the seeds of what happens for Neville are planted in, I think, in a lot of ways, in this very chapter that we are doing today. And there's an adult in this chapter who is very influential in helping Neville establish some level of self-confidence that he was able to build on in later books in the series as time moves on. So, right. All right, moving away from Neville for a moment. Then we get an interruption from our dear Seamus, and so he leans in and tells Harry that in the Daily Prophet that morning, which I thought Hermione was already taking, but maybe not. Hermione's everywhere anyway in this book. So anyway, Neville tells Harry, and of course Ron too, because he's right there, that Sirius Black has been sighted, and it was reported in the morning's Prophet. And Harry's like, where? Actually, Harry and Ron are both like, where? And Malfoy hears them talking, and so he's like looking up and listening, and Seamus says that it's not far from there, and it was a Muggle who saw him, and of course by the time somebody arrived, they say Black was gone. or by the time the Ministry arrived, Black was gone because they called the hotline. The Muggles did, which connects them with wizarding, people. They don't know that, but that doesn't matter. And so they're like, "Oh, not far from here, huh?" And so Malfoy's still looking around, and they're like, What, Malfoy? Do you need something else cut, like, or skinned, or what?" And so Malfoy plants this whole thing about, like, "Oh, you planning on going after Black yourself? That's what I'd be doing if it was me, And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And he just is like, "Don't you know?" And this is sort of a thing that happens, like, at least a couple, or if not a few times in the books, where, like, because of the way. Well, I think honestly it's because Lucius wants, like, Draco to, like, have a leg up in whatever way he can. He, like, tells him things that, or either that or Malfoy listens at keyholes a lot. One of the two, or perhaps a bit of both. Anyway, because I mean, how Malfoy presents it obviously isn't necessarily how Draco, presents himself, or his information isn't always necessarily going to be accurate. But he always says, "My father told me," but you never know. Anyway, there's just multiple occasions where Draco knows about things that Harry doesn't, and it's like the Triwizard Tournament is I think an example. Yeah, it is, and I feel like there's maybe one other thing, but I don't know. Anyway, and so that's, like, always kind of annoying, because it's the truth is that Malfoy does know. Like, it's not like it seems, and Ron obviously, like, definitely wants Harry to think that it's just Malfoy trying to, like, get a rise out of him and, like provoke him, because Malfoy is a provoker, and so, like, that part fits. But anyway, so it's back and forth, and Malfoy is doing his perfect little job of, like, saying everything but the actual thing. He's like, "Well, maybe you'd rather not risk your neck, but if it was me, I'd go hunting myself." But of course he never tells him. He's like, "Oh, you don't know." So there's all of that, and so he just never. And before they can finish the conversation, also, of course, Snape intervenes and is like, "All right, you should be done. Clean up, and then we'll find out if Neville's or in his case, Longbottom's." That's another thing that's in this chapter. Well, we'll get to it in a minute. Well, I'll bring it. Hopefully, I'll remember. It has to do with how teachers usually address students. And in this case, by their last name, or in England, surname. So anyway, yeah, Harry's like, what is he talking about? And Ron's like, hey, he's making it up, which of course he's not making it up, but Ron's just like, he's just trying to get you, to do something stupid, which that is probably true, even though the other part about him making it up is not true. So anyway, Snape's, like, making a spectacle out of humiliating Neville. He actually asks everyone to gather around. And so he explains again what's supposed to happen. He's like, if it's, if he did it right, then the toad will become a tadpole. If not, then he's likely to be poisoned. And he says that like just very callously, and I'm like, that's just really shitty. I'm sorry, there's just no other way around that. Anyway, so he does the thing, and Trevor pops down into a tadpole. And so, of course, the Gryffindors are all excited, and they're applauding, and then Snape's like, 5 points from Gryffindor. Because he knows that Hermione helped, and Hermione doesn't deny it. So there's that, and he dismisses the class, and so that ends the conversation too by that happening. So they're all headed back up into the entrance hall, and Ron's like pissed and talking about what Snape just did, and he's like, "Why didn't you lie, Hermione?" And then, like, he looks around and Hermione's not there, and he's like, "Wait, she was right behind us. How did she? What the? And then Malfoy comes by and he's all, smirking and being his usual Malfoy-ish self. And then they see Hermione like a little way back, and they're like, "How the what the?" And she's like tucking something down the front of her robes. Like Hermione's, it's like they're treating the whole thing that Hermione's doing kind of how like I say they, it's a she. Her name is J.K. Rowling. She's treating Hermione's little secret here, kind of like how the movie reveals Tyler Durden in Fight Club, like with these little flashes. Anyway, whatever. It's just fine. It's not the perfect metaphor, but I like it. Right. And so she's like, and Ron's like, how did you were behind and then you were back, and Hermione's like, what? I had to do something. I had to go back and get something. And then like her bag splits and like books go everywhere, and Ron's like, why do you have all these books? We've only got one more class today. And she's like, yeah, but I'm taking a bunch of subjects here, hold all of these. And he's like, but you don't have any of these today. And she's like, yeah. Ooh, I'm hungry. I'm starving. Which, of course, she would be because she's been like, well, anyway. And Ron's like, do you get the feeling that Hermione's not telling us something? And it's the end of that scene. But that's like, the seeds are continually being planted. That there's a little bit more than meets the eye. There's some mithril hiding under. There's something else going on. Anyway, making random Lord of the Rings references that only certain people will get, and will still be like, that doesn't really make sense. That's okay. So now we're on to Defense Against the Dark Arts, and so they arrive, and Lupin's not there yet, which is just another like potential reference to his condition, if we will. Anyway, so they all sit down and they've got their books out and all ready to like take notes. And of course, Lupin subverts all of the things they've come to expect about Defense Against the Dark Arts, which hasn't been that great these past 2 years. And the first thing he does is say, you can put your books back in your bag. You just need your wand. Today it's going to be a practical lesson. And they're like, ooh, practical lesson. Fucking finally. So they're like, okay, cool. And then we're reminded the last time that there was anything remotely practical that could have been considered that would have been when Lockhart let the pixies loose, and that was obviously a disaster. So Lupin leads them out of the classroom to outside the staff room, and but on the way they run by Peeves, and Peeves immediately sees Lupin, and most of the time Peeves is fairly respectful towards teachers, but he starts singing a song, Loony Loopy Lupin, and just sings it over and over again. And Loony, again, a bit of a reference to Lupin's condition. So anyway, so Lupin's like, and apparently Peeves has put gum in the lock of like a broom cupboard, and so Lupin's like, giving him shit. He's like telling him you need to take that out. Filch won't be able to get to his brooms and blah blah blah. And because it's still early in the book and Filch hasn't been mentioned, we get a description of who he is. We're not going to bother with that. And so then Lupin does like a really good job of like scoring some cool points with the kids. He does like this little spell that's kind of whimsically named Wadi Wuzzy, and when he does it and points it at Peeves, the wad of chewing gum like flies out of the keyhole and runs up Peeves's nostril, and so like he leaves. And Dean Thomas is like, cool. So this is what I was gonna say. Yes, and Lupin's like, thanks, Dean, or thank you, Dean, whatever. But the point is that Lupin addresses the children by their first name, or Christian name, as it were, in the UK. And that's like, it's like a nice way of like treating the children with a bit more respect than the average teacher might, without like creating too much familiarity, because they still have to call him Professor Lupin. It's not like he's like, hey, you can call me Remus, you know. So yeah, so it's like it represents sort of like a different approach to teaching and learning, and like how a teacher can relate to his or her students. Anyway, so they now get to the staff room, and Lupin opens the door and leads them in, and we have a little crossover because Snape is in the staff room. And of course, when he sees the class come in, he gets up like, all right, well, I'm gonna get the fuck out of here because I don't want to be around these kids because I hate them for whatever reason. And anyway, and so then he proceeds to fucking bully Neville some more, by telling Lupin that this class contains Neville Longbottom, and that you shouldn't entrust him with anything difficult unless Miss Granger is hissing instructions in his ear. So it's just like, why you gotta be like an extra dick? Like that's not necessary, you know? But he doesn't like Lupin either, you know? And so like, it's like he's just predisposed to be himself, I guess. Anyway, but Lupin, instead of just be like kind of like laughing it off or just being like, well, whatever, and letting him leave, he's like, well, as it turns out, I was hoping that Neville could help me out with the beginning of our whole little thing here, and I think he's going to do a good job. And so he stands up for him, both as a teacher who wants to start with a fresh, have a fresh start with or a clean slate with a class, and not show any favoritism, but also you could say that he's being like pro Gryffindor in a way too, because he's one, and obviously he knows he's teaching. He's got Harry there. He knows he's teaching the Gryffindors today. So I don't know, but either way, it's just, it also just says something about who Lupin is as a person, and the way he's been treated in life. He's gonna have sympathy for the ones who are maybe looked down upon by others. So that's, and I don't even know how he would know much about Neville. Maybe he does, because the wizarding community is not very big, and so you do kind of get the sense that like a lot of people know about each other, because it's just not it's like England's not a huge country to begin with, but obviously most people don't know each other there. But if you took it down to like what you got to figure, maybe the wizarding population is like, it's got to be a really small percentage, like really small, like maybe there's a few thousand wizards in England. Maybe I'm like way off by this. What do you guys think? I don't know that it's ever really truly indicated, but I guess my point is that it's not uncommon for people to mention other people and sort of like assume that they know who that person is a lot of times. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it's just, I don't know. Either way, it's still a small percentage. I don't think that really changes. But what the actual number might be, I'm sure I could be way. I don't really have no way of guessing. But it just doesn't seem. All right, I said that like 5 times. Fine. We're moving on. Anyway, Neville's obviously like really embarrassed by that, and that's just it's unfortunate because Lupin has done the best he could so far to help. So anyway, Snape leaves, and so now the whole situation is about to start, and so there is, aside from just like the chairs and tables, there's a down at the other end of the room there is a big wardrobe which the teachers keep spare robes in. This would be the same one that Harry and Ron hid in at the end of the previous book while they were listening to the teachers talk about what happened with the Chamber of Secrets and Ginny and all of that. Anyway, in this particular situation, it's closed, and as they get closer to it, it kind of like rumbles and like bangs off the wall, and they're like, "Whoa!" And this scene is kind of interesting in the movie. I was watching it the other day, and I was watching this part because I almost recorded this episode a few days ago, and it just ended up not happening. But anyway, the one of the cool tricks that the director of this film employs in this particular movie is like camera movements that like camera tricks that do movements where they like move through glass, and in this particular case a mirror, because the front of the wardrobe has a mirror on it in the movie, and it's like the camera is moving from like inside the mirror to outside of it. I don't know. It's like it's a really cool trick. And it happens like it moves through like a window at one point. I think like at the Leaky Cauldron or something like that. I think it happens like, I don't know for sure because I haven't finished watching the movie, but I believe it happens a few times throughout the film, maybe more. I don't know. Anyway, the scene in the portrayal of this scene in the film overall is reasonably accurate, but they do some extra shit. Aside from like also sticking the Slytherins in this class just so they could have Malfoy like make a comment about the teaching, to even though like he's like, it's like the Slytherins aren't involved in any other way, and it doesn't even necessarily seem like they represented all of them, but you see Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle there. Anyway, and so Lupin explains to them that what's inside the wardrobe that's banging around is a Boggart, and then we go through the whole little spiel about like the fact that Boggarts like dark and closed places, wardrobes placed under beds, cupboards, under sinks, etc. Anyway, and so then we get to ask what a Boggart is, and Hermione, of course, has the answer, and we find out that it is a shapeshifter, and that it will take the form of the thing that frightens us most. And that's why I said earlier that like, what is your Boggart is kind of a very personal question that most people probably would prefer not to answer, and I'm not going to ponder it right now either. But it's something to think of to yourself. So you could ridiculous it. So yes, that's speaking of that. Lupin explains that there is a charm or a spell that you cast that that basically, I don't know, like it's a little confusing as to how it's supposed to completely get rid of the Boggart, because it seems like several people are going to face it here in a minute, and then it seems to be banished or like destroyed after they all like a combined casting of the spell. Like, I don't know if you cast it like with more force or something. Like, does it just like get rid of it right away? Like, I don't, because Lupin says what finishes it is laughter. But I'm like, what if you're not in a happy mood? Like, how do you, like, I don't know. It's kind of like the thing that, like, with the Patronus that makes it a little bit tricky, because you have to think a happy thought. And it always bugs me that Hermione has trouble with it. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. That's neither here nor there. Mm-mm-mm. So yeah, and so Lupin also explains that nobody knows like what the Boggart's like when it's alone, because that's the one time that it's not going to be taking shape of somebody's fear. So it must be some sort of like just, I don't know. We don't know, but we know that it can bang around. So and it's pointed out. Well, Lupin says that we right now we have an advantage over it, and he gets Harry to answer the question, even though Hermione's trying real hard. But anyway, because there are a group of them there, that the Boggart will have trouble knowing what form to take, because whose fear do you embody when there's a bunch of people in front of you. So and oh, I just thought about something, because Lupin says it's always best to have company when you're dealing with a Boggart, because it becomes confused. And he explains how like, one time, he saw a Boggart make a mistake, because there were two people, and it tried to like transform like into like part of one person's fear and the other part of another one's, and it like just ended up being like half a slug, and that wasn't particularly frightening. Um, But he says the charm that repels a Boggart, which is interesting, because that's like when we think of Patronuses, like they repel Dementors. They don't kill them. But it seems like you can like kill or again like banish a Boggart if you like hit it with this charm enough times. Anyway, so the charm is ridiculous, which obviously sounds a lot like the word ridiculous, but it's a bit more Latin sounding. It's harder consonants and no y sound. Ridiculous, colus. Anyway, so then he's explaining that like that the word enough is not alone. And so he goes on to explain how you have to find a way to like make the thing that you fear the most comical looking. And so he explains this to Neville by asking him about his grandmother, because he lives with her. So he obviously knows about Neville for whatever reason. Well, he was in the Order, so he would probably know. He would have probably been friends with the Longbottoms. I don't really know what. I don't remember what. I don't must say remember. I don't think it's really mentioned which like generation of witches and wizards the Longbottoms were in. Like, are they closer in age to Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, or are they closer in age to James and Lily? Because those two sets of parents produced Harry and Ron, who are the same age. So I mean, they could be anywhere in between, because Ron was born later, relatively speaking, in the Weasleys' marriage after they had all these other kids, whereas Harry was the only child of James and Lily. We know these things. I know. Anyway, point being is I don't have any idea where Neville's parents fit or fitted, but what they did fit into was the Order of the Phoenix, and so there's a good chance that Lupin actually knew them from that, whether they were like friends outside of that or not. And so that's another thing that does tie people together here, I guess. Like when that's what I was thinking of earlier when I said that maybe it's not so much that the wizarding population is so tiny, but maybe it's just that like most of the people that we meet in the story are connected with the Order of the Phoenix, or through Hogwarts, and so there's just connections there that would like sort of tie people together. I don't know. Anyway, right. Let's move on. And so anyway, so Lupin is going to now guide Neville through, and again, this is like we're getting like such a good example of how great of a teacher Lupin is, because he's not just throwing Neville to the wolves. Like here's a charm, now face the Boggart and see what happens. Like we're gonna poison your toad. Good luck, he's like, he breaks it down, and he's like, okay, first of all, what do you fear the most? And he's like, Professor Snape. And he's like, no, 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 speak up. What did you say? And he's like, fine, Professor Snape. I'll say it a little less mumbly. And of course, everybody laughs, and even Neville like grins a little bit, like, no, it's kind of stupid, but you know who he is, right? He was just here. And so, but Neville, like, but Lupin does not laugh, obviously, and he's like, okay. And so then we get mention of his grandmother, and he's like, oh, I don't want it to turn into her either. And he's like, no, 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 no. He's like, imagine the clothes that your grandmother wears, which again, obviously Lupin knows. And so Neville explains all the stuff that she wears, and he's like, all right, can you picture that in your mind? And he's like, yeah, okay. He's like, now, I want you to imagine them really hard when you cast this spell, because when you do, the idea is that you're going to put Snape in your grandmother's clothes, which is pretty hilarious, and the movie did a perfect job with this. Even though the way that I mean, I know that's nitpicking, but like the way that Lupin questions Neville is a little different in the movie. Because like I don't know, he's like exceedingly like not just patient, but like I don't know, he just does a really good job with Neville in the book. In the movie, it's like a little bit more like he's like, can you imagine your grandmother's clothes? And he's like, yeah, well, she wears this. He's like, you ain't got to tell us, just imagine it, And it's like, he wouldn't be like that. He would let him say it out loud if he needed to say it out loud. Because here he prompts him to say it out loud. Anyway, whatever. It's still cool. And then the actual scene of Alan Rickman Snape, like having his clothing like change and like making him walk all funny and shit. It's pretty hilarious. So anyway, and so like Lupin walks Neville all the way through the process. He's like, and you're gonna say the charm, and you're gonna think about the clothes, and that's what's gonna happen. So, sure enough, and so they back away, and they, he's like, all right, we're gonna let you stand in front, Neville. And here we go. I'm gonna give you. He gives him the count of 3 and the whole 9. Like he sets him up to fucking succeed, and guess fucking what? He does. Like it takes him a minute, like he has to steel himself, but like he opens up, the wardrobe opens, and Boggart Snape comes out, and Neville fucking does the ridiculous charm, and boom, fucking Snape's clothes change, and he becomes he becomes Snape dressed like Neville's grandmother, which is, especially with the hat with the vulture on it is a particularly like, who the fuck would wear that? But apparently Neville's grandmother. But why? I don't know. But it's worth it for her to wear the damn thing just so that it can get stuck on Snape in this scene. It's almost like that's why she put it there in the first place. I don't know. Anyway, so, and then we get like a little bit like a look at like some other sort of, not to say innocuous, but just, other random students like fears, like Parvati comes forward, and there's like a mummy, and let's see, who else do we get here? Seamus comes forward, and a banshee starts to scream, and but just to to demonstrate what they do, Parvati, when she does her charm, which, by the way, everyone here is succeeding, by the way, because Lupin set them all up to think that they can do what they need to do, and like explained exactly what they need to do, and he gave them a minute to think about it before they even started the exercise, and so. So yeah, and so the mummy like unravels and trips over and shit, and then the banshee, like Seamus is basically like, it's almost like he's performing a silencing charm, because he like, it's the wail of the banshee, the cry of it that I guess is like the scary part. I don't really understand banshees, so whatever. But so Seamus makes it, go like mute. Um, and then and so then like it goes through without even telling who they are. We get a snake and then a bloody eyeball, and Dean becomes like a severed hand. And then the hand gets trapped in a mouse trap, and then Ron goes forward, and of course, in the movie, it's funny they did this. I mean, it's the same thing. He has the same Boggart in the movie as he does in the book, which is basically one of Aragog's relatives, a giant spider. In the book here, when Ron does his ridiculous, it loses all of its legs and just sort of like rolls around like in in the movie. And I think this was actually pretty funny, even though it didn't really make a whole lot of sense because I can't imagine that wizards roller skate. But it put roller skates on the spider's legs, and so all of a sudden it couldn't like walk. It was all like bumbling around everywhere with like a roller skate on the end of each leg. So like for a movie, I mean, it made it comical. Anyway, but and also in the book, and I think this is like legit. Like everybody, or at least a few people, scream, and like everybody like pulls back. In the movie, it's like it's scary, but it's like it's mostly scary for Ron. They don't make it as like everybody else's reaction is just more like they kind of back away, I think. Anyway, and then here comes like another major difference. Just for the hell of comparing, it the here in the book the spider's like body without its legs like comes to rest as it rolls away in front of Harry, and when Lupin sees that, he steps in front of Harry and like deals with it immediately. In the movie, instead of like leaving us wondering what's going to happen when Harry faces a Boggart, we actually see it. It changes into a Dementor, which is going to come up in the next chapter of the actual book as in a conversation. But here it's like, or there in the movie, I should say, they chose to show it, I guess, as a way to like deal with that information quicker, and as opposed, and I haven't watched much farther past it yet, so I don't remember like how they framed the conversation between him and Lupin, but I'm pretty sure they do have it. But it's interesting because like that's in the book we're sort of left wondering like what was about to happen, and Harry is left feeling very like damn, like Lupin didn't think I could handle it. Was he afraid I was going to pass out again? But well, we'll see and later that's Lupin didn't know what was going to happen, but well he did have an assumption, but his assumption was incorrect, and he stepped in front of Harry because of his assumption. Anyway, and when Lupin steps in front of it, it changes into like a crystal orb. Well, I say crystal, but like a how is it described? Damn it, where did it go? A silvery white orb. There we go. In the movie, they made it way more obvious what it actually was. Here, like she's obscuring it on purpose. She's like telling us what it looks like, without actually telling us what it looks like. Whereas in the movie, it's obviously a moon, and it's surrounded by clouds, just in case you weren't sure it was the moon. So it's like, okay, that probably means something, because it's a big, full, round moon. Which, by the way, right now, as I am recording this, there is a beautiful full moon outside in Georgia right now. I saw it before I came in here to record this. Anyway, random side note. Anyway, yeah, so here it's just a silvery round orb thing. And so, blah, 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 blah. And so then, so Lupin like brings it all full circle and gets Neville to do it again. He's like, "Come forward, Neville, and finish him off." And so the same thing happened as happened the first time, or the same thing happens that happened the first time. Snape comes back again, and then Neville's able to hit him with the ridiculous and make him change again into the clothes. And Neville laughs, and then the Boggart explodes and bursts into smoke. And so that's what I mean about how, like, apparently, like, I feel like there must be like another way that you could deal with Boggarts, but or maybe, like I said, maybe if you somehow, like, through your force of mind, which is used as a descriptive term in this chapter, maybe you could destroy it quicker without having to do the ridiculous over and over again, because that's another thing. This is another creature that's set up for a chapter in book 5 that's actually one of the more horrific and just generally sad moments in the whole series with Mrs. Weasley and her Boggart. But we'll leave that alone for right now. But anyway, but the point is that she's like doing it over and over and over again, and of course she's also like sad, and so she's not really able to do anything remotely approaching laughter, and she's by herself. And that's another thing, like Lupin makes the point here of saying it's better if you have somebody with you. And she went to try and deal with it on her own during a rough time, and it ended up being problematic. So I feel like there's a lot of things that are said in this chapter that are very useful, and a lot of things that are sort of set up. Because, like I said, the Neville thing, like, it all starts here in a lot of ways, as far as his progression into a stronger, more self-confident person and character. And so, and Lupin reinforces that by sending him back to finish the Boggart off at the end of the class. So he's first, and he's last, and he's the one who destroys it. And so it's like he accomplishes something in front of his friends, and classmates who aren't his friends even, and so, like, that's a big fucking deal. And it's their first class too. Like, so it's like, it's just, yeah, that leaves a big impression on somebody. So then Lupin doles out the points for everyone, who faced the Boggart for Gryffindor, and then also to Harry and Hermione for answering questions at the beginning. And he just tells them he gives them homework, yeah. And so they leave, and so everybody's all like excited, and it's like this great lesson. And Harry's like, but why? I mean, and he's not talking to anyone. He just feels like kind of ashamed. Like he feels like like, is it because I collapsed on the train? Is that why he's not gonna like let me face the Boggart? Do you think I wouldn't be able to handle it? Meanwhile, everybody else didn't seem to really notice that Lupin intervened on his behalf. They're all just like excited about the things that happened with them and their Boggarts, and how they faced them, and how they I mean, that's a hell of a like self-esteem building thing. I mean, like, literally face your worst fear. Granted, you're a child, so hopefully your fears aren't as like, unless you're Harry, they're not terribly horrific. They're like, and sometimes they're not even terribly rational, but nonetheless, that's the life you've lived up to that point. You can't be older than you are. Ask Fred and George in book 4. Anyway, and so it's like, face your greatest fear, and not only that, but find a way to make it funny, so that you can kind of laugh at yourself, even in a way, and at your fear, and then defeat it. Like, that's pretty fucking great. So anyway, so everybody's like, and I mean, and even Ron's like, it's the best defense against the dark arts class we've ever had, and it was. I mean, obviously, and Hermione's like, yeah, he's really good. And Hermione's like, I wish I could have faced it, though. And Ron actually pretty much accurately guesses, like, what would yours have been? Like a piece of homework that only got 9 out of 10. And we do get to see, even though it's not perfectly on screen when it happens, so to speak, but later Hermione will have to face a Boggart in an exam, but still, um, yeah. And actually, no, I shouldn't say but still. It's actually because of the fact that it's during an exam that it makes it that much more, like, pronounced what she sees. Um, anyway, that is the end of that chapter. That's how that goes down. And let us do our segment. I did not prepare myself properly here, but it's okay. I just need to pull up the comments stuff. And let's see what we've got. Because it has been a little while. I've been preoccupied the last several evenings, so I'm hoping to pick the schedule back up a little bit. But yeah, I just wasn't able to do it. Oh, right. And so somebody going back to, so Cardinal Doomsday had posted the question about why didn't Ron hail the night bus in book 2, and when I addressed this question at the end of the last episode, I couldn't in my moment, and then that moment in my mind, I couldn't think of why or what the scenario was that they were even talking about, or that Cardinal Doomsday was talking about. And then somebody reminded me, and I don't even see that right now who it was, but somebody reminded me that what was probably being referenced was the situation when they couldn't get on the platform, when Dobby had blocked the platform and they ended up flying the car. And then it may be that Ron just didn't know about it, or maybe he did know about it, but he didn't know how to hail it. Maybe he just didn't think of it. I don't know. It's a good question. Obviously, like, another possible answer is that she hadn't invented it yet, and so, it didn't. It wasn't an option. Not to mention, that flying the car couldn't have, had the car had to. That's Chekhov's car. I don't even know about that thing really, but that's like, you had to plant the car in the Forbidden Forest so that it could save him from the spiders. So that's also probably why. But anyway, oh no, it was Judy. I'm sorry, I see it right there. That's who explained about what it was that was probably being referenced. Let's see what else. Hang on. Sarah Meads explained in a bit of detail. Well, no, just gave a bunch of parallel or equal phrases. I was talking about the term "pop his clogs," where Hermione was talking about how Harry saw a Grim and didn't pop his clogs, which I understood that the phrase meant die, but here we get reference to kick the bucket, bite the dust, also die. But she also says that nobody seems to know the origins. Maybe something to do with my clog-wearing, mill-working ancestors. What if? Well, no. If it's an old phrase, I was gonna say, like, what if it's something to do with, like, how, when you have, like, a stroke or a heart attack, like, sometimes, like, you can have a clog breaking free in your bloodstream. But I'm like, they didn't know what that shit was back when that phrase probably existed. So that's not the kind of clog they're talking about popping loose. Let's see. Cardinal Doomsday provided lots of information, as is often the case. I don't see any Jorge comments here. What's up with that? But let's see. Okay, so Damocles' role was the Minister for Magic, who was the first one to decide to make Azkaban a prison after the wizard how do I even say that? No, Ecrisdis, I don't know. But he was the one who built Azkaban before it became what it was. And then the Dementors infested it. That's another thing, and I may have said that. I don't really get how, like, first they talk about how, well, in this history anyway, it's talked about how the Dementors just infested this place for whatever reason. But then later it's talked about how Dementors to have like a steady supply of souls to feed on or whatever. And I'm like, well, there wasn't anybody there before. They were just there. So I don't know what drew them to the place. Maybe there was something about the dark magic that like drew them. Maybe there was something there for them to feed off. I don't really understand. We never really get a status. Okay, fine. I think that's about it, though. Let's see if there's anything else that I'm missing. No, that's all. Yeah, that's all stuff from the previous time. Okay. I believe that is everything that we need to address. And as I say, hopefully the schedule will pick back up a little bit now, and we can keep on trucking through this book on our way to I'm not looking beyond this book. This book actually has a lot of really interesting things and some character introductions, some that have already happened or are just happening, and then some later. A lot of important seeds are planted in this book. This is really where the series starts to branch a bit, as far as number of characters and just like the scope of the story, you know. And it is kind of, I forgot I was talking with Adva about this too, and we were like saying that this book and book 6, it's those two that don't really have an active Voldemort story, even though he's sort of always lurking in the background of every story. But yeah. Anyway, right. So there's that. Yeah, we will see you guys next time. I will stop rambling about nothing and enjoy the rest of your day part. And peace.